Okay, let's get started. I prepared a few slides here. So on the automation framework in OMNM is event-driven. That means an event, alarm, or a syslog comes into the system, and we have an event processing rule that does something, and essentially it does something useful for you in terms of generating an email or taking some action on the system. So that's the general process we're going to be talking about. When I say events or alarms, these may originate from the network. It can be from a device that's sending OMNM links. Alarms, and it could be a link down, link up, an authentication failure, BGP transition, anything that a device can send can come in and trigger an EPR. And then events may also be internally generated. So for many of the actions or activities that happen in the system, we're going to generate a red cell. It's called a red cell event, and it's essentially an internal alarm that you can also trigger an EPR with. These examples of these include performance thresholds exceeded on a performance monitor. If you have a condition or a threshold that you exceed some preset limit, it's going to generate an event that you can trigger some sort of action on or automation. Proscan failure is an example, a backup failure, even a backup success or a Proscan success is going to generate an event that you can generate an automation from as well to do something or send an email out as well. So the EPR is the key component that drives the automation. With the automation framework, you can automatically take action based on events or alarms or syslogs. You can send email notifications. You can auto-execute custom action. You can execute built-in actions such as device restore, a device backup, anything. We have several of these that are already built in that you can also trigger to occur. And with the use of filters, you can further control automation execution based on specific events, such as device IPs from specific events. So if an event comes in on a link down and you only want it to trigger on a specific IP or a specific range of IPs, you can do that. And there's much more that you can do in terms of filtering and getting more granular control. A simple example we're going to look at is a link down event. And for example, from IP address 1.1.1 or device 2.2.2, send an email notification. I'll show you how to simply automate that process. So as I mentioned in this demo, you will see how to set up the above example. In addition, you will also see how to create an automation for an internally created event that occurs when a Proscan failure is detected, and also how to correct the device configuration automatically based on that Proscan failure. Okay, the simple case, as I mentioned earlier. So the process is event, alarm, or syslog, goes to an event processing rule, and then you do something useful. In this case, it's going to be a link down. We're going to create a rule or look at a rule for a link down and set that to trigger only on specific IPs and send an email notification. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now. So it would be good if I had the system up here. All right. Okay, so the first place we're going to want to start is, in this case, is with a definitions and rules, which is where you define event processing rules. It's simply a matter of right-clicking and say New. There's an option of pre and post processing rules. The pre-processing are things that occur to the alarm before it enters the post-processing rule phase. So for example, if an alarm comes in, it's normally informational and you want to set the severity on it. For specific cases, you can do that with a pre-processing rule. That's an example. For the sake of automation, we're going to use post-processing rules. And so I'm going to create a new one here, and we're just going to give it a simple name, my link down demo. And it should be enabled, and then there's a checkbox here for dealing with duplicate events. In some cases, and it's going to depend on how you want your rule to behave and what you're doing with it, But if you get a trap storm of a particular thing, do you want it to generate this action every single time, or do you want it to just hide duplicate events? So I'm going to leave this unchecked for my case, but just be aware that that exists. And next. In this case, we know we want a link trigger on a link down. So you simply search for your event that you want. And you say go. And we want a link down. And so we see a couple link downs here. So you're going to need to know what you're searching for. You can add both simply by highlighting them both, say add selection. And what that means now is that we've got an event processing rule set up to say that if either one of these events come in, process it in according to the action that we'll perform in the next tab. Right now we don't have any other filter on it, so any link down that comes in would take that action. So you'd want to add some filtering capability here and say, okay, I want this to come from a specific IP that I know about. You can simply just say, or you can say in if you have a group here that you want to add, and you can simply add, and for example, we had a 1.1.1.1, we're going to add it, 2.2.2.2, add it. So that's now in our list of filter conditions for this event when it comes in. There's a whole lot of other ways to filter this, and that's just one example. So now we're filtering this just for these devices, and so assuming this is the rule that we want to do some action on, we're done with the filter conditions. Let's go to the next screen here. Now is where we decide what kind of actions we're going to do on it. There are some pre-built things that I'll mention here. Config change is part of our change determination process, where if you want this particular event to trigger a flag that says something, the configuration changed, this all factors into our change determination process, which we'll talk about in another meeting. But you can northbound forward it if you want to another system. You can send an email, or you'll do custom, which is where you select an action, so it can do something a little more. You can go to the device and put configuration on the device, or do a show command, or some other item that is in our actions list. For now, we're just going to do emails for an example, and so here's you're given the email list. And I'm just going to put down a name here, link down, and you just add your recipients, blah, 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 at gmail.com. And just add them. And that's really all there is to it. You can add a subject and email header if you like. But really, that's it. Your rule's created. And so now anytime a link down comes in that meets one of those OID conditions from those two IPs, it will send an email to that list of things you've just identified. It's as simple as that. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, which is a little more involved case. This is for an internal event. So in this case, the use case is we're going to use a Proscan policy to detect a bad configuration statement. The Proscan policy failure event will trigger an event processing rule, and there will be a corrective action script that will go and undo the bad configuration. And so for those of you that don't know, Proscan is a feature that allows users to scan files to determine if a condition is present. And for example, a configuration file can be scanned for a string, a grouping of text, repeating text, etc. And so items that you can scan are the results of an ACLI command, a show command. You can do configuration files that are already in the system on a specific date. You can do a configuration files by label. And when I say configuration files, I'm speaking of file management, backup, and restore, and the files that are saved there. And then we can also do the device's current configuration. So the process is, you got a Proscan policy. It states if the following lines exist in a Proscan, it is a Proscan failure. And this is because what our Proscan is basically saying, we do not want the public community on our box, SNMP server community public. We do not want the string on our box because it is not secure. So our Proscan would be set up this way, and I'll show you what that looks like. It's a very simple case. And then the next part would be that we would, the event filter on the EPR will trigger only on specific things. For example, the policy name, and then it will also trigger on specific devices. And this is just to show you how you can decide what you're going to do. You need to know that policy name so that you know how to correct it. The policy name is going to tell us what it was looking for, and the string in the config file that was bad. And then by doing that, we know what action to attach to it to correct it. And the specific devices part of it allows us to know that what kind of device it is, and so we know what commands to send. So what we're going to do is our action is going to be we're going to send a no SNMP server community public. And that's going to fix the situation, and that's what we want to do with our automation, be proactive. And that's why they call it Proscan, because it proactively scans, and then you can take an action on those kind of events. So again, here's our process. Event armor 6 log comes in. We're going to create a processing rule, do something useful. Our example is we are going to look for the red cell Proscan failure notification, and we're going to create a rule to send an email, and send an action to correct the condition. So let's go look at that. First, we're going to look at the Proscan, then we're going to look at the processing rule, and then we're going to look at the action that's going to be executed. So Proscan is a portlet off of the main home page. I'm sorry, the resources page. You'll see a portlet here called Proscan. These are the configuration that can go out and be pushed against devices to scan them for specific conditions. For our example, I'm going to show you one here that's in the system, and it's for scanning a Cisco box for a community string to public. So let's just go look at that, see what it looks like. So here's how you initially set up a Proscan. This is a whole separate meeting, so I'll go quickly through this. This is where you have the option to scan different types of input sources. We're going to scan a direct device config. You could set explicit targets. Most of these are not set, so that you can grab groups of devices and execute the scan directly from Resource Manager. So the criteria here is the important part. So you set a criteria of what you want it to look for. And in this case, it's a very simple SNMP server community public. So the way to read this is the policy is compliant if it does not contain this string. So it is not compliant if we see this. So we expect a failure if we see this. So if we do have a failure condition on Proscan, it's going to send that event I was speaking of called a red cell Proscan failure notification. It's going to go through the event processing rule. Again, the rules are in alarms and definitions. I'm going to go to my event processing rule to show you that. So here's my event processing rule. I called it EPR to remove SNMP public community if Proscan compliance fails. That's just my long name to make it clear what we're doing. And we can see here my name, my filtering condition. So I'm filtering on the event of Proscan failure. In addition, I'm also saying that the Proscan policy name that fails must be the one I just selected, the Cisco SNMP community. I just pasted that in verbatim what the name of that policy was. So if I see those two combinations together when the event comes in, I'll know which policy failed. Otherwise, it would just, for every Proscan failure, it would try to trigger. But this gives us a little more control. So then also I want a little bit more control that if it comes from these two devices, 2.30 and 2.31, do I want to trigger the action? And so my action are two things. As you can see here, I'm going to send an email. I've already set up an email list. And I'm going to run this demo action to remove public. So let's go look at that action so we can see what it is. But that's the EPR. It's all done. Let's go look at the action. Go to Resources again and Actions. And so here's my action to remove public. Let's take a quick look at that. And so it's just we've talked about actions in the last meeting. I won't go into this much more. It's a very quick script here. All it's going to do is send a simple command. It's going to say config t no server community public. It's just going to take it off. And so it's going to for the devices that come in, the event processing rule is going to know what IP it came from, what policy failed, and then that it was a Proscan policy. And so there it's going to know to execute that action to undo that particular thing that it found. Okay, that's a lot to go through, but let's go ahead and let's just trigger an action here and see what happens. Trigger an EPR and we'll see what happens here. So resources, the device I'm going to choose today, and again, I could choose more, but I'm going to choose one right now, this .31 box. I could choose multiple to have it run against the scan if I wanted to. They can be scheduled in groups if you want, and so if they don't have to be run one at a time. First thing I want to do is I have an action just to make sure that this compliance policy is going to fail. And I just created one over here and I categorized it as diagnostic. I'm going to show the SNMP string so we can see what it looks like. So we make sure that it will fail. It's just going to run a quick show command. And so what we do see here is we do have the public command on the box, so we do expect it to fail. And so what I'm going to do is right click. If I can get rid of that cursor. I'm going to do it's in change management. And so you can execute Proscans. If you choose this first selection, it's going to run every possible Proscan that is applicable to this class of device. It depends on how it's defined. But I can selectively run a scan here by telling it that I want to run a specific one. So I do want to run the Cisco SNMP string not public one, so I'm going to select that one. Okay, and I'm just going to execute it. What we expect to happen is it's going to go back up the file. If it's a new config, it'll back it up. If it's not new, it'll just scan it, and it'll say, does this compliance deficiency exist? It should detect it and say fail. Once it detects and says fail, and there we see it. There's our failure, and it's saying config term does not contain. This is basically the way it comes out because of the way it's written, but it should not contain SNMP server community public. So what do we expect? We expect an email and we expect an action. I'll show you right here down below. You already see my email came in on my Gmail, so it comes in looking like this. Just to give you a quick example here, and I've added a few things to the that email screen so that it gave me more output, but it's showing the entire event and what failed and all the details of that particular alarm. So the email got triggered. We know that worked. We can go back and look at a couple other areas here. Let's go look at this. Let's run that command again. Oops. Let's run that command again to see if it actually did remove it. So we're going to go to that actions again. And I'm going to go back to that one and show the SNMP community. And we should not see public on there anymore. And so you don't see it here. It was right there below 6789. It is not there anymore, so we know that our action kicked in, our automation worked. Let's go look at a couple more areas just to show you what you might expect. So we look in our alarm window, and here we see, here's the Proscan failure event that came in. And it's basically, this is what triggered everything. And I also have the audit trail on here in this window just to show you as well what happened here. So, so what you see here is the history of the actions that took place. So let's scroll down just a little bit here. I'm going to refresh this. So here's where the Proscan got executed. It decided it didn't need to back up the file. It updated the label and moved it. It's just saying here that the equipment, from the equipment point of view, it got proscanned. And then it ran the action to, it executed the task. So there's an audit trail saying that the action actually executed. And then this is the actual action that got executed. And again, the device, there's quite a bit of audit logging here to tell you that the device also received the ACLI. Then we ran the show SNMP here. This is showing what we did. So it looks, everything went through well, and the automation worked. So that's a very simple example of how you can automate and be a little more proactive on things, on how they work. A very good performance example would be something like a performance monitor threshold gets exceeded, or a condition gets exceeded, and in response to that, maybe it's a bandwidth utilization is up at 80%, and you say, if I get more than 80%, I want to trigger an EPR to go send a command to that box to adjust the bandwidth allocation on that particular interface, or do something to the device so that it remedies that situation. So it's very powerful and not that difficult to use. It's actually quite easy to use. One last thing, In 6.2, users will have the ability to create event processing rules on OMNM audit log entries. So instead of automating an action in response to an alarm, you can have that same behavior for audit logs. And there's an event in the event definitions called red cell audit trail entry, and you can use that to create an EPR. Why is this useful? Number one, in some cases, audit logs need to be forwarded to northbound systems, just like alarms, and the automation framework lets you do that. We saw that you could do email and then northbound forwarding. You can do that with audit trail logs as well. And then number two here is in some user activities in OMNM do not generate an event or alarm. Examples would be creating a report template, generating a report, creating or deleting profiles, discovery profiles, etc. And so all of these activities only generate log entries. And so you could create an EPR that can be used to automate actions in response to these. Say you have report templates that you don't want deleted, or you want to be notified if someone deletes them. You could do that with an event processing rule. Same with a discovery profile, or somebody generates a report that you want to know about. You can trigger off that audit trail log instead of the event. Okay, so that's a quick tour through